Now turning to our program, please welcome Jackie Frederick, retired CEO of Versity and Blood Center of Wisconsin, to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Kent, and good afternoon to all. I'm honored to introduce Brian Thompson as our speaker today. I've known Brian for 20 years and have watched him expand innovation and entrepreneurship across our community. Brian is a seasoned innovation leader with over 30 years of experience in corporate, early stage, nonprofit, and education settings in roles spanning business, technology, and innovation. Brian is currently the Chief Innovation and Partnership Officer at UWM, working with the Chancellor, where he leads key initiatives to link UWM and corporate partners for research and talent, such as the Connected Systems Institute with Rockwell, the Northwestern Mutual Data Sciences Institute, and the Freshwater Collaborative of Wisconsin, only a few. In 2015, Brian led the creation of the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center, which he led until 2023. There he works with industry leaders, faculty, staff, and students to bring ideas to market, learn from their entrepreneurial experience, and become effective change agents. He's also co-lead and PI on the Milwaukee I-Corps Innovation Corps program sponsored by the National Science Foundation, and you will hear more about that. He first came to our community and the UWM community in 2006, where he launched our first UW Milwaukee Research Foundation, resulting in the Catalyst Grant Program and the launch of over 20 startup enterprises. He was at one point a California guy. In previous roles in California at Hughes Space and Communication, Brian led the development and launch of communication satellites, worked in corporate ventures, helped create startups in biotech and the entertainment industry. He holds bachelor's and master's degrees in mechanical engineering from Purdue and an MBA from UCLA. And he rides his bike along with Mark, more or less all over the world. So with that, Brian.
Thank you, Jackie. It's an honor to be here today. I've had the pleasure of seeing a few of your previous speakers, and I'm grateful to be invited. I'm going to talk a lot today about the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center, and much of the work we're doing in innovation entrepreneurship, and what I'll share today is grounded there. And I want to start with the note of gratitude. The Lubar family has been instrumental in helping make this possible, and we're grateful to them and all the other supporters that support the work that we do at UWM. You don't make something like this happen, and I believe it's a really special asset, not just for UWM, but for our community. You don't make this happen without visionary supporters like the Lubars and visionary leaders. Chancellor Emeritus was instrumental in helping us get this created. So Chancellor Emeritus Moni, thank you for your help there, and I have every confidence that our new Chancellor, Tom Gibson, will continue and help accelerate that work. So start there. I'm going to go quickly, partly because it's the only way I know how. We've got lots to cover, but if there's something you see here you'd like to learn more, I'm happy to send you a chart. Or I also have a saying that I seldom turn down a cup of coffee. So be anxious to learn more about your business and if we can help you think about ways to apply some of this. Hopefully, we're also going to have a little bit of fun today. So let me jump in. Here's the big idea, innovation entrepreneurship. And Jackie, thank you for mentioning my history. And you could sort of say I was a rocket scientist, but in launching communication satellites. Innovation entrepreneurship, it's not rocket science. And it turns out that rocket science isn't rocket science either. Rocket science is really a process of taking a very complicated problem, breaking it down into a whole bunch of really small problems, putting it back together, and making sure it works when you launch it. Similarly, innovation entrepreneurship, there are a set of processes and systems that have been developed and vetted in various entrepreneurial settings and incubators around the country, and that's some of what we employ in the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center. So it ain't rocket science. That's one of our big takeaways for today. So the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center has a series of building blocks that we do to put these things together, but they're really aimed at this idea of how do we help people with entrepreneurial thinking. I believe that regardless of, for our graduates, whatever their chosen path, whether they're nurses or engineers or business or arts working in the arts, they will be more effective at their job if they have these skills in innovation and entrepreneurship. So that's part of what we hope to achieve. We'd like to touch every student at UWM with innovation and entrepreneurship along their way. Some of them go on to launch companies. Love it when they do that too. But really more broadly, it's about helping our students, the UWM community and the Milwaukee community, how to be innovators and implement entrepreneurial thinking. To do that, we have a series of building blocks at the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center. If you come next week to the Rotarian event, you'll get to see some of this. But it's a series of things that include workshops and pop-ups and the National Science Foundation I-Corps program that Jackie referenced. We put these all together to sort of offer a suite of programs. But at its core, we have two fundamental building blocks. One is design thinking, and the second is lean launch. I'll touch briefly on design thinking and then dig a little bit in on lean launch. Design thinking is really a process for tackling ambiguous problems that maybe aren't well defined. We've applied this in situations with a K-12 system locally, helping them imagine an experience and reimagine an experience that carries through from elementary to middle school to high school. We've also applied it working with the Wisconsin Air National Guard, helping them rethink an industry engagement process that they do looking outside of their organization. It's been used in microloans, developing microloan programs in third world countries and other areas. And so that's one of the core program blocks that we have. The other one is lean launch. This one we employ extensively in the I-Corps program with startups and with our faculty innovators. And it's really about understanding a model that can add value. And we want a model that is both scalable and sustainable. And so that's the core of the lean launch approach. They share these elements in common: experimentation and discovery. It takes a little bit different form in each area, but these are the common elements to it. So lean launch and design thinking. Let me hit quickly on design thinking. It's a process. It ain't rocket science, as I said. So it starts with going out to understand your user, maybe figuring out which problem it is you're trying to solve. And then we focus down, based on some insights we've gleaned from talking to our user in particular, and try and figure out what's something that we can work on solving. From there, we flare out. We ideate around ideas and hopefully go to prototyping and testing of an idea. So it's shown here in sort of a linear fashion, but the way it really takes place is more nonlinear. You may go through it the first time in a linear fashion, but then you may bounce back and you may say, you know what, we want to try a different problem, or we want to brainstorm differently or test on something else. So there's a process. There's a couple things to know about the process and to think and take a step back. One of them is the problem space versus the solution space. Now, I'm an engineer, and we are guilty, I'll admit, in general, of jumping too quickly to the problem space. And oftentimes, we need to spend more time in the solution space figuring out what problem is it we're trying to solve. Maybe we're not solving the right problem. So an understanding of the discipline, and it maybe in working with your own teams, taking a step back to say, what problem are we trying to solve here? That can be an effective thing in innovation. So the problem space versus the solution space. The other thing to know about the process is, when are you flaring and when are you focusing? If you're on a team and part of the team is flaring and part of the team is trying to focus, it can be very uncomfortable and maybe not so productive. And so in the design thinking process, you start by flaring out, learning about your users, focusing down on a problem, flaring out to brainstorm ideas, and then focusing down to test. So just an awareness of that process element can make you more effective and can help you lead and manage these teams more effectively. So that's a little bit about design thinking. Now, there are processes for ideation, brainstorming. This is something you can learn and teach and practice with your own teams, and you'll find actually in our work that you develop this culture where people know when they're moving into brainstorming mode, and they take on a different approach, and they step up and do that. So it's something that you can play with, and we'd be happy to play with you further. Now, I mentioned brainstorming. we're not always in brainstorming mode. We've had the chance of working with the Wisconsin Air National Guard, and hierarchy is an important thing to consider. In highly effective organizations, decisions follow the chain of command, but information flows freely. One can imagine that in the military, we need a chain of command for a very good reason. But there are times when you want to level that playing field, if you will, in order to foster innovation, entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurial thinking. And we've had the pleasure, as I mentioned, of working with the Air National Guard, and in one workshop, the leader signaled to the whole group that we were going to level the playing field, honestly, by putting her name card and writing her first name, which everyone followed suit along with. And so you may want to think about this in your own organizations. If you're trying to get people working and brainstorming an idea, you bring them together, maybe if you bring the CEO in, if you are the senior leader, think about the hierarchy and how do you send a message that we want to open ideas up for everybody. So a couple process thoughts on the design thinking side. Let me turn now to Lean Launch. This one is extensively applied in programs, incubator programs across the country. There are three basic elements: the business model, customer discovery, and minimum viable product, or MVP. And they're used iteratively. The business model, we use a framework called the Business Model Canvas. We didn't invent this, but we've adapted it here. And the way it normally works is we spend a couple hours on the whiteboard working with a team to map out a business model canvas. It has all the elements that will eventually go into a business plan. If you're going out for financing, you're going to need that business plan. But the insight here is to treat all of these as a bunch of guesses around your business model. And your business model is kind of like that Jenga game where if you pull out the wrong block, the whole thing's going to tumble. The trick is to figure out early on what are the risky assumptions in your business and go spend time trying to de-risk those assumptions. That's the purpose of the Business Model Canvas and helping frame up the next part of the process, which is customer discovery. Going out and talking to people in a very particular way to test elements of your business model where you don't pitch the idea per se. The third piece is minimum viable product. It's a method of experimentation. So let me dig in a little bit on the Business Model Canvas for starters. Usually, this is centered around the idea. An entrepreneur, a researcher comes to us, they've got a technology, they've got an idea. What we do is help them build around that a business model. So in software has product features, and people sometimes confuse the product features with the business model. We need to think separately about what is the business model that you're trying to deliver. And so we start with this idea of who's the customer, who are the users, who's the purchaser, who are the influencers, and what's the organizational context. And then what value proposition do we offer them? What gain enhancers do we offer, and what pains can we solve for them? And connecting those two things together and understanding which customer sees value in which things can be a very powerful thing, and it can help us as we try and scale the business later. That also can inform us about which market segment we should be going after and how we're likely to enter that market. We look at things like relationships and channels, and in the case of channels, there may be a direct virtual channel where we're delivering things to the customers. We may work in a bricks and mortar context, or we may work through a partner organization. So we can map those things out, at least map out guesses of those early on, and go investigate those. So the right half is about who wants this thing and why. The left side is about how do we deliver value. We start mapping out every bit of activity that we think has to happen to deliver that value. And then we take a step back and say, what are we good at? What should we do? And what should we work with partner organizations to do with us? And so there's a strategic question of what do we narrow down to and how do we pick fewer things to work on that we're good at? From there, you should have an understanding in the organization of what kind of resources you need. What talent do we need in the organization? What sort of capital do we need to have in order to make this happen? So on the right side, underlying that is this idea of revenue. And on the left side, it's about costs. So on the revenue side, we can learn about price points and get some estimate of what our sales and volumes and revenue might be. And on the left side, thinking about non-recurring costs and recurring costs, we can get a sense for whether this business can make any money. And so we treat it all as a bunch of guesses, and then we go out and test those guesses. So let me introduce an example here. Lindsay Roddy. Lindsay Roddy is a PhD nursing student at UWM. She's also an ICU nurse, and I will say proudly, an entrepreneur who's demonstrated great tenacity. Lindsay, working in the ICU, noticed a dangerous situation when a central line pulls out of a patient. And ICU nurses, and nurses are great hackers and managers of complexity, I want to acknowledge that. She saw an opportunity to make this a safer environment, to help better manage the many lines that are used to help protect a patient in the clinical setting. And so she came with an idea around how we might improve patient safety and help with faster recovery and other things. And she had a good understanding of the people around the problem. You've got the patient, she's an ICU nurse, she knows that part of the problem, and there are physical therapists and occupational therapists that also play into this role. So we worked with Lindsay on mapping some things, and she's gone on, actually has a product in market. Part of what she did is prototype this, but she really focused on the customer discovery piece to better understand her business. So let me turn now to the customer discovery piece and give you a couple of insights there. The first, the idea is to use that business model canvas, as I said, to say, what's the worrisome part about this business? What are the parts we really need to investigate first? So in Lindsay's case, it may be that we want to understand this product market fit. Does the purchaser see value in reduced costs or fewer errors? This is something we can test, and by framing it that way very specifically, we can go ask specific questions to get that answered. Another question in her business might be, how do we scale this? What are the relationships we need with distribution channels, group purchasing organizations, and others to get this product not just to one hospital, but to many hospitals? And so we use the canvas to frame up what's important in her business. Now, coming back to the customer discovery, there's another big idea here, and it's something that we'd like to say: your mother will lie to you, all right? Now, your mom, if I go to my mom and I say, Mom, I got an idea for a new business. It's gonna be an app that helps you manage your medications, and it's gonna look at your schedule, and it's gonna know when you're busy, and it's gonna send you a reminder when certain things are available. And my mom is gonna say, Brian, I love that idea. And then I say, Mom, would you spend $10 a month on this idea? And my mom is gonna say, well, sure, Brian, I would. Your mother will lie to you. Customers will lie to you, not because they want to mislead you, but because they want to encourage you. You're an entrepreneur. And so what we train the teams around is, how do you ask questions in a way that even your mother couldn't lie to you? And there's a great book by Rob Fitzpatrick. We give away hundreds of copies of this in our I-Corps program, and I've had colleagues that said, after using that program, being I-Corps and using that book, they go back and change the way their organization does voice of the customer work. The idea is, instead of asking, would you buy this, would you pay for this, do you like this idea, you ask very specific, backward-looking questions. Previous, recent, past behavior anchors people down. So, Mom, tell me about your medications. Did you take them today? Oh, no, I always take them at dinner. What about over the last couple of days? Have you found that the work of my mom, she's on different boards and book clubs and all kinds of stuff. Have you found a conflict? She's like, well, no, usually I take them at dinner, and most of my meetings don't happen to fall around then. Yeah, okay. Well, Mom, what about apps? What apps did you use on your phone today? Have you downloaded any new apps in the last week, in the last month? Are there any apps that you pay $10 a month for? The answer is no, in my mom's case. So we train people to focus on really specific questions about past behaviors. And the other thing that's really interesting about customer discovery is when you ask people about their work, they like to talk about their work. So if you come in with real specific questions, they'll tell you some things. The other element around customer discovery is teaching teams to follow the money. Knowing where the money and the decisions flow in the organization can help them better define the value propositions and figure these things out. Now, people, if you're not coming as a competitor, but rather an entrepreneur that wants to learn from them, and you ask them, how big's the team on that? Wow, what's the budget for that? Is that like $1 million a year? And they'll be like, oh no, it's 3 because we have the capital budget included in that. Oh, okay. Tell me about a software product that you've purchased lately. And what was the vetting process? How did that have to go through? So asking these questions are the kind of things that can help you identify and de-risk those questions about your business model early on. Follow the money. The other idea that we're extending that to as we work with teams around AI is follow the data. Inside an organization, how the data flows is key to many of those implementations. So there's a couple of thoughts on the customer discovery process. So if I come back to Lindsay and the company she now has, Roddy Medical, she still has an understanding of those core users. In the ICU, we've got the nurse, we've got the PT and the OT, but she has, and the value propositions for them around safety and things like that, she understood those at the start. But what she now has is a much richer understanding of the whole environment around that. So the ICU nurse reports to a nursing supervisor, and there's a structure over them that includes a nurse manager, a nurse educator, and other organizations. There is a leadership structure at the healthcare organization where the chief medical officer, chief nursing officer, chief financial officer all have a perspective on what's important to their organization. And she's also learned about other elements, the care and use and value committees that report up through the organization. And she's been able to map out for all of those groups, what are the different value propositions, what's probably going to be important to them. So now, as she approaches healthcare systems, and if you've learned about one healthcare system, well, you've learned about one healthcare system, it's very complex, but she can work with them to understand who she's talking to, what they might value, and she can present to them value propositions characterized in a way that makes sense to them. So she's used this customer discovery process to greatly better understand how to take her product to market. The third element, minimum viable product. And so for minimum viable product, oftentimes in the software business, we think about the 1.0 version. The 1.0 version is your MVP, maybe the first thing that people would pay you for. And from there, you scale it with your more featured product of 2.0. In our work, we like to take that a step back. Anything you can do to test an assumption around your business model is valuable. Small little experiments that you can do, not next year after 3 months or 6 months or a year of development, but this afternoon, tomorrow. So with my mom, I could say, Mom, let's try a little experiment. Let's talk about your medications, share your calendar with me, and I'll send you calendar invites. And maybe, you could get me to work with friends in your book club. Could I try this with a half dozen of your friends? Now, I don't want to spend any money on software. I want to do this manual, all the stuff I can do in the background just to see if anybody cares. And I'll go back and check them out. So small, clever experiments. The big idea in MVPs and prototyping in general is to think small. We work in sometimes we're at the university and we're thinking, well, this might be something we could try with students. Could we launch a program and try that out next year? Well, what could we go try this afternoon? Could we go over to the library and talk to our students and figure out what's happening there? Think small. There was an example of a university that wanted to look at putting cell phone chargers around campus. So they took clipboards and balloons, put a questionnaire out there, and you went by and the student would say, the question said, how long before your next class? How full is your phone? And a couple things like that. So for the price of $100 and some clipboards and balloons, they were able to check out a whole bunch of different locations around campus and get a better idea which ones would be the place to put it. If you've ever seen the movie The Founder, there's a great example in the movie where they're trying to figure out the kitchen layout. The Founder is about the story of what went on to be the McDonald's empire. And so the guys are trying to figure out, how do we make this kitchen work faster? So they go out to a tennis court and they chalk out on the line some ideas for the kitchen layout, and they bring the whole team out there. And they pantomime and they act out, carrying along the sandwiches and the pickles and these sort of things. And they scrub it off and they try again. They actually go through 3 iterations and they come up with this idea for a better layout for the kitchen. So for the cost of an afternoon and some chalk, they're able to try out a bunch of different designs and get an idea what's going to work. It's a great movie, but that particular example I like from the standpoint of experimentation and prototyping. The bigger idea is, in your organization, how do you create a mindset for experimentation? Kyle Weatherly is actually a UW system regent, but Kyle co-founded a company with a UWM alumni, graduate Jesse DePinto. He came to speak in a class and he made the comment once, Jesse and I don't argue. We just ask, how can we test that? Think about that for your organization. How do you create that environment where people say, how do we test that? And some experiments are not going to work the way you expect, but you will learn from that. So creating a mindset for experimentation is a really valuable thing in your organizations relative to innovation and entrepreneurship. So that's the idea around Lean Launch, these elements that you iterate around quickly to figure out what the risky parts are, and then you'll go on to scale your business. We employ this extensively. My colleague, Dr. Ilya Avdiv, is here. He leads up our NSF, National Science Foundation, I-Core program, Innovation Core. This is where we have faculty researchers and their graduate students go through the program. We have had nonprofits go through this. We've had university departments and in colleges go through our program, and not just for UWM, but for the Milwaukee community largely. Approaching 300 teams, they've gone at least more than 1,000 participants, and they have gone on to conduct more than 9,000 stakeholder interviews as they went out to figure out, is their business going to work or not? A lot of learnings took place there. There have been 180 mentors that have helped us on that, and we're grateful for their help. There might be some here today that have done so. And I want to acknowledge that among those mentors, we had at least a dozen who said, this was so valuable as a mentor, I want to come back and take my own company and my team through this. They've launched about 41 companies and raised money. Now, 41 out of 280, that maybe the ratio doesn't seem large there. That's actually okay. Some of them came in with the company, some of them were nonprofits, but more importantly, if you go through this process and figure out your model's not going to work, we'd rather have you find that out early. And many of the people that do that, sometimes a researcher comes back with a different idea later and goes through it again. So that's a win for us. We didn't waste time or money on an idea that wasn't going to work because we found a flaw in the market. We go back and we try it again. We're currently launching a new program. If you're interested in learning more, Ilya is here, and I know he'd like to talk to you about what it means to be a mentor in that program. I'll take a step back now and look at strategic partnering in general. And so this is part of the effort I get to work with at UWM, and I'll highlight a couple of my colleagues in the work they're doing. Our Connected Systems Institute is a partnership between UWM, Rockwell Automation, and Microsoft. Dr. Joe Hammond leads that effort, and we're really trying to help advanced automation and AI in the manufacturing space with technologies and talent that helps companies implement these technologies. That work has led to the partnership with Microsoft and the launch of the AI Co-Innovation Lab. It's one of 4 globally, and it is there to help companies prototype solutions in manufacturing. So together, Joe and Juliana Javor, who leads that for Microsoft, meeting with companies, identifying opportunities, and building up a prototype that they can then go own and scale. Dr. Prush Papatla is our leader on the UWM side for the Northwestern Mutual Data Science Institute. This is a partnership with UWM, Northwestern Mutual, and Marquette University. and he has colleagues at the other two institutions, and that's really about creating a pipeline of talent in AI and data science. And credit to Northwestern Mutual for taking a long view on how do we do that. It includes new curriculum, supporting students, supporting research to build a pipeline of talent with the long view. Ilya Avdiv I mentioned with the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center, and Marissa Jablonski, Dr. Jablonski leads our Freshwater Collaborative effort, which is a UWM system-wide effort to link together water programs across the system to help with a pipeline to jobs for our students and for the companies in this space, as well as solving challenging problems like emerging contaminants and creating sustainable solutions. So the work around AI in manufacturing space has led us to get out and talk to companies. We spend time walking the floor. And so I'll turn a little bit just for a minute to AI. On the AI space, and here's where I'm violating, this will be hard to see in the back of the room, I acknowledge it, okay? It's about people and processes first. And so as we're talking to companies, we go out and try and figure out, all right, you've got your customer acquisition process. There's probably a marketing manager, maybe a sales engineer involved there. There's the engineering process on the front end. There's operations and maintenance and production. And that's fed by a supply chain management organization and external suppliers. There's the leadership and there's the delivery and the service. So there are these elements and there are people that own these processes inside your organization. So it's about people and process. It's also about data. The data is sprinkled everywhere throughout the organization. It's typically very messy. And so on the front end, it might be external facing marketing things. It may be web and social postings, or it could be product and spec sheets. On the engineering side, specs, test data. In the production side, there are probably PLC controllers that are spitting out a lot of data that may or may not get harnessed. There's production schedules, there's maintenance logs, there's data throughout your organization. And so when we're out talking to companies, we're looking for opportunity. Where is there a business case that we can support, a use case we can define, and reasonable data from which we can build a solution? These are the things we're trying to bring into the AI Co-Innovation Lab. Only then, after the people, process, and data, do we think about the tools. So the tools might include a large language model, and I'd want to think about that large language model and where do I draw a line between the security of what I want to keep inside my organization and outside. If it's that marketing stuff that's already up on our website, I'm happy to put that into a large language model. But I may find that I want to have a customization layer built on our own proprietary information and separate that very carefully to be protective of our data. You may have an AI agent that you want to deploy around a certain part of this process, or it may be simply that we don't need generative AI. We could simply do it with the machine learning algorithms. So understanding the process. And then another element might be, how do I access that data? And maybe I need to develop some special APIs which get that data into a usable format. So people, process, and data, and then the technology. So one last thought on the process engineering. I'm reminded of something I learned in business school decades ago about expensive and failed lessons in trying to implement ERP systems. So ERP systems, and the broader idea around processes is processes are either slow and fast, or they're stupid or smart. And to be frank, most of our processes are probably slow and stupid. And what they learned in ERP implementations, and literally billions were lost trying to figure this out, was you can't go from slow and stupid to fast and smart. You have to go from slow and stupid to fast and stupid before you can go to fast and smart. And so I have great hope for what generative AI can do in our world. But for now, as we're looking for these opportunities, start with something you understand, where the data is there, use AI to speed that process up, and then you'll be poised to move over to the fast and smart side. Last element, I've told you about 2 key programs, and there are other building blocks around that, but there are a lot of levers that we pull in our work. And so if you're able to join us next week for the Rotarian event, you get a chance to see a little bit about what we do. If that doesn't work for you, as I said, I seldom turn on a cup of coffee. I'd be happy to welcome you here to the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center and take you through and talk about what we do. So with that, I would turn to your questions, and if I can answer anything for you.
Thank you so much for your time today, Brian, and we look forward to the tour next week. If anybody has a question, please step up and make sure to introduce yourself before you ask your question. That was a really good presentation. Thank you. I think we have one coming here.
Hi, Brian.
Good afternoon, Tom.
Tom Lujak. We know each other a little bit. Spent some time at UWM together. Brian, I love the process that you walked us through in terms of entrepreneurial thinking. Could you share with folks in the room how this can work, this type of thinking can work for even very young students? You know, freshman arrives on campus and isn't sure what they want to do in life, let alone imagine what they might create. How does the Entrepreneurial Center give them some hope that they might be someday creating businesses themselves?
Creating businesses, and there are tools here that can be effective in just the career discovery piece. So one of the things our colleagues have done is create a Design Your Life experience, where we're using design thinking skills for students to explore what their passions might be and how they might shape their career. The other thing we found with graduate students, some of the students that have gone through the process of customer discovery in our I-Corps program, one of our faculty researchers, Jen Gutzman, made the comment. She said, you know, after going through I-Corps, my student was quite different at conferences. He asked questions and he engaged in a way that she had never seen before. And so with Ilya's leadership, we created a graduate student boot camp focused specifically around teaching these skills to students so they know how to talk to people at companies. And the big idea is go ask them questions about their work. Lean in with genuine interest. People will talk about their work and they'll help you understand maybe a career path for yourself. So there are a couple different ways in which we're trying to make it adaptable for students and add value there. Thank you for the question.
Hi, Brian. Nice to see you. Elizabeth Szynski with the Wisconsin Policy Forum. You had mentioned in your example of a nursing student creating a product or a company. How are you engaging students, departments, et cetera, who may not want to start, create, run a company, but want to cultivate that entrepreneurial mindset?
Thank you again for the question. One of the things we do is we have a set of pop-ups. Pop-ups are a way to engage the campus broadly, and we're very proud of the fact that each year we have over 5,000 touch points in these pop-ups. So that might be coming into a class in business to do an exercise around thinking about a new idea, or it could be going into an arts class or a letters and science class where we use a storytelling mechanism and teach students around this. So that said, you know, we have a broad engagement strategy, but there's a lot of demands on our students' time, and it's a constant effort on our part to try and make sure they're aware of what we do. And to your point, though, it's not just about starting companies, it's really about life skills that we think will make them more successful.
Ryan Daniels from the Milwaukee Public Library Foundation. Thank you so much for your presentation. You talked a little bit about AI, but I know that AI is a very important part, you know, in a number of solutions coming up, but specifically when you talk about design and design theory, I know AI is being used a lot to do some of that ideation. Could you just talk about that process and how are we going to educate our kids differently?
Wow, there's a lot packed into there. And I should point out that we have a broader effort at UWM around AI. We formed a task force about 1.5 years ago, tried to look at use cases, and we involved operations, teaching, research, as well as responsible AI, thinking about the ethics of AI and how it's applied. And so our faculty are frankly challenged or grappling with this idea of how do you continue to teach critical thinking skills in ways that are important, because I firmly believe these are, you can't just rely on the AI to answer all the questions. I'll give you one example. We have a very clever faculty member who leads all of the freshman comp classes. Everyone has to take a English 101 or English 102. And what she's having them do, and in that comp class, the students have to respond to prompts. They're given articles and they have to write about the article. And so what she's having them do in their freshman year is read articles about AI, about responsible use of AI, use of data, issues of bias and things like that. And she's using that as a prompt. Now, I don't know how she manages the prohibition on having AI write your ideas, but I think it's really clever to get students thinking right away about the ethics of AI and how they're implementing it. That's it. Now, we also have a variety of faculty members who are trying different experiments, and we're working with colleagues at other institutions, at MSOE and Marquette, and even the medical college, to learn what they're doing as well. So I'd say there's an emerging community of practice. We're all trying to figure it out. We're trying to do the best we can for our students in the long term.
Jeff Spiller. No AI question. Your last graphic went by quickly, so I may have got it wrong. It basically said in AI you're going to do fast and stupid. So you made mistakes. You'll make mistakes. And as we teach AI and as we talk with our business community, which has a very conservative reputation, either deserved or not deserved, what thoughts do you have on AI innovation and entrepreneurship, specifically with respect to application in the Milwaukee business community?
So for clarification, I don't want to foster mistakes, but there's a process dependency on how you implement new processes. And so the other element around AI is, particularly as we experiment with new things, you want to have a human in the loop for critical things. So I believe AI can be a valid thing to support decision making, but I'm not willing to cede all the power to AI right now. So I'd want to be very careful on that point. But that said, going from I'm not suggesting that we're all trying to we have stupid processes, but going from slow and stupid to fast and stupid is really about automating a process you understand now so you can move on and clean up the data for future things. So, but the bigger idea, I think it's important to acknowledge AI is not, generative AI in particular, has these issues of hallucination and they're getting better, but still, you want to have a human in the loop and you want to think about where you're using it in a thoughtful way.
Hi, Brian. We've met before when I was working under Dr. Smith, but wanted to ask you, what are some of the best innovation programs you have right now, startups that are in your incubator that you're really excited about, that you can share about in either the last 2 years or what's happening now?
Thank you for the question. Well, I mentioned Lindsay Roddy. Roddy Medical is now in market with an FDA-approved device, which can improve patient safety. We have another one that has gone to scale to some extent. A couple of our physicists developed a new materials technology, and it really speaks to the value of UWM as an R1 research institution. And they were looking at something under the electron microscope, and they said, gee, that's funny. What they had discovered was a new form of graphene or graphene monoxide, which can be used as a carbon-based semiconductor. They've now gone through ICOR, and Dr. Erschmaguld, who leads that now, will tell you that she's gone on and done 500 customer interviews to explore different parts of their model. But she's gone from being able to make nanograms to milligrams to grams, and they have to make boxcar loads ultimately to sell this as a better material in batteries. So that would be another example. We have some in the life sciences space, so those would be a couple examples. But one of the really special things about working at the university is you get to work with researchers and help them understand, through processes like ICOR, a broader application and importance for their work.
Hi, Brian. This is Kaushal Chari with the Lubar College of Business. A very insightful presentation. I have two questions. One is relatively easy to answer and maybe put you on spot.
We may only have time for one question. Go ahead, Dean Chari.
So who drew all the artwork?
I like to say we got a guy.
Okay. The second question is, could you please talk about the Ignite program that mentors startups?
Thank you for asking that. So in addition to the programs I talked about, we have a partnership with the Lubar College of Business for more of an incubation. So we have companies that are that have maybe done some customer discovery and are ready to launch. And so in partnership between the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center and the Lubar College of Business, Ignite is an incubator program. It's a year-long process that teams go through. We've got 10 teams going through that. It's a variety of teams. In fact, we have an Ignite participant here today. And so it's a incubation program where it's the first 6 months of it is a deep dive in the business model, and then we couple that with additional support and resources through the Lubar Entrepreneurship Center and Lubar College of Business over the next year. So it's in its third year. We've had some great successes out of that, and if you're interested in learning more about that or other programs, be happy to take that up.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.